Hello everyone, I'm your hostess with the mostest, 8-Second Gaming, and in today's video we are be talking about the Season 24 Split 1 weapon tier list. Going into this season, all of the weapons got buffed, all of their damage numbers were changed. It's absolutely crazy, but today I've got you covered, so let's jump in and talk about it. But just quickly, if you're looking to take your Apex skill to the next level, then you have to check out the GameLeap website right now. Over there we have top level coaches creating the best, most highly informative guides to make you the best player you could possibly be. We have legend guides, gun guides, VOD reviews, and much more, so click the link in the description, pick yourself up a membership, and start to improve today. But okay, with that done and out of the way, I do want to cover two things just very quickly before we actually hop in. First thing is the care package weapons. You will not find the care package weapons on this tier list. They're all above everything else. They're still really strong. There's no point in putting them on a tier list, so we're not even going to talk about them. And the second thing is, every single weapon this season is strong. With the damage changes that they did going into the season, you can literally pick up anything and have it do well for you. So if your favorite weapon isn't in the tier that you thought it was going to be, just kind of keep this in mind that it is still a good weapon in terms of the fact that it is still going to kill people incredibly fast with the time to kill changes. But now we can actually start talking about the weapons, and to start off we have the F tier, and there's only one weapon here, and that is the RE45. The RE45 is just such a joke of a weapon, and it has been for season after season. Even when it used to have disruptor rounds, it still wasn't even a good weapon. The only saving grace that this does have is the fact that it has the pistol strafe speed, so you can be a little bit more elusive while using this. But it loses to basically every single other weapon in close range, and as you start to move into the medium ranges, it doesn't have the recoil or the fire rate to really keep up there, so you're going to lose to assault rifles, LMGs, stuff like that. The only real reason that you should be carrying one of these is as a light mag holder until you find literally any other light weapon, and then you should be replacing it, so that's why it's down here. But now we can move into the next tier, which is the D tier, and there are three weapons here. We've got the Alternator, the P2020, and the Devotion. Starting off with, we have the Alternator, and the Alternator is a very beginner friendly gun because it does have a very easy to control recoil pattern, and it does have a pretty decent fire rate, but for the most part the Alternator is not going to win straight up gunfights. Even with the time to kill changes, the Alternator just doesn't have the same kind of damage numbers that most of the other weapons in the game have. You're going to be losing up close battles, you're going to be losing medium battles, and unless you were the first one to fire on somebody and it took them a really long time to realize it, they're probably going to turn on you and they're probably going to kill you. The Alternator is a fantastic beginner friendly weapon, but that is about it. And next up we have the P2020, and this is honestly a gun that I would put in the F tier, except for the fact that the Akimbo P20s are actually somewhat solid. They're not standout-ish this season, especially because they did lose the hammer points going into the season. If hammer points were still in the game, I would probably put these in the S tier, but the up-close fights that these are good in, you're probably losing to a shotgun or the other SMG like the R99, or even an EVA 8. You're just losing everything right now. The P20s are fun to use, and I still do find myself picking these up from time to time, but they're not a good weapon. That's why I'm putting them in the D tier. And the last weapon down here is the Devotion. Now, LMGs are not in a horrible spot right now, but the Devotion just doesn't have the wind-up time to compete with all of the other weapons. By the time the Devo actually gets spun up, you've probably been put into a death box and sent back to the lobby by literally every other gun in the game right now. The L-Star, the Nemesis, the Volt, just so much better options when it comes to energy weapons, and there's just so many better options when it comes to literally any other gun in this spot. The only reason that I have it in D tier, not F tier, is because when it does get spun up, it does put out some pretty solid damage, and you can do some stuff in fights with this, but other than that, it is a D tier weapon. But with that covered, we can move into the C tier, and just like the D tier, there are also three weapons here. We have the Car, the Triple Take, and the Mozambique. Starting off with, we have the Car, and the Car is probably the hardest one for me to place on this list because it's not necessarily a bad weapon. It still does have some pretty decent damage output, and with the ultimate accelerator on it, it does have some pretty good usefulness, but the issue with this is that it doesn't have the same playability in the meta. The spray weapons like the R99 and the Proudly with Select Fire are just better options, and if you want to have an up-close weapon, the EVA is just a much better option in terms of that also. The Car just kind of feels a little lackluster in terms of all of the other up-close weapons, and especially in terms of the SMGs, the only one that's really worse than the Car is the Alternator, and that's just because it doesn't really have the same fire rate. And again, I'm not necessarily saying that the car is a bad weapon, it just doesn't feel like it's a good weapon right now, and that's why I'm putting it in the C tier. But next up we have the triple take, and the triple take can hit really hard when you do choke it up, but right now the meta is just a little too fast for the triple take to really have a place in it. It does do damage and it can still hurt people, but when somebody's running at you at Mach 50 with a Maggie Ball or a Ballistic Ult or an Ash TP, this just doesn't really have the same effectiveness as some of the other marksman rifles, and you're probably going to have a dead weapon in your secondary because you're going to have to swap off of it, and it doesn't really do anything in the close range. I do know that some people say this can be used as a shotgun, but that is not true. The triple take in close range is not a good weapon, and you are going to lose to literally every other up close weapon in the game unless the person that you're fighting is Helen Keller. I think if Respawn wants to bring the triple take into the meta a little bit, they're going to have to speed the choke up time of it so you can actually get those shots off, but until that happens, that's going to stay in the C tier. And the weapon rounding out the C tier is the Mozambique, and again, this is a weapon that I could have put a little bit lower, except for the fact that the Akimbo Mozambiques do still go pretty hard. And again, if these still had hammer points, these would be wild. They're still hitting for like between 48 and 60 damage depending on how many headshots you hit with the pellets, so it still does do a decent chunk of damage, and with the Akimbos with a purple bolt, you can put out some pretty solid damage numbers. The reason that I'm putting them in C tier and not anything higher though is because they're losing out to pretty much every spray weapon in close range, and also the other shotguns just do more damage than these. There's no real reason to run the Mozambique over an EVA 8 or a Mastiff right now, and if there's no reason to run it, then there's no reason for me to put it any higher, and that is why I'm keeping it in the C tier. But now we can move on into the B tier, and there are 6 weapons finding themselves here. We've got the 30-30 repeater, the charge rifle, the longbow, the sentinel, the prowler, and the volt. Now starting off, we have the 30-30, and I know some people are going to be a little bit weirded out by this because the 30-30 did get a pretty solid damage buff, and it is doing a lot of damage when you hit headshots, but it has to be fully choked up. And like I said with the triple take, you're not really getting those options to choke up the weapon. And I do put this in B tier over the triple take because it does choke up a little bit faster, and it is a little bit more versatile, but marksman rifles right now just don't have the same fire rate that they need in order to actually be solid in the meta, and when people rush you and get on top of you, you don't have the same playability that other weapons do in the close range, so you basically have only one weapon in close range, and that's not good in this meta. And that's basically the same for the next 3 weapons, the charge rifle, the longbow, and the sentinel. I'm going to be talking about these at the same time because they're all 3 sniper rifles. They do the same thing. They're good in those long range fights, and you can still do some pretty solid damage. A charged sentinel is terrifying. A charge rifle at long range when you're one-shotting purple armor with a headshot is scary, and the longbow does have a pretty decent fire rate, so you can put some solid shots downrange. But this meta is all about getting on top of people as fast as you possibly can. So when you get rushed and you have a sniper rifle in your back pocket, that's not going to help you in those close range situations, and it's not really solid for the meta. The only reason that they're in B tier, not anything lower, is that they do still have solid damage output potential, and if you are able to get a really solid shot onto somebody, that can open up the opportunity for your team to push instead of the enemy team pushing you. So that is why I'm putting them in B tier, but they can't be anything higher because they're not solid in those close range fights. So yeah, B tier. Next up though, we have the Prowler, and the Burst Prowler, scary. Select Fire Prowler, scary, but it's not scarier than an R99 or an EVA 8, and the Prowler doesn't have the same playability that those weapons do. SMGs are a little bit finicky right now. They're good, but they're not overly good, and the R99 is like kind of the exception to that because the R99 is just stupidly strong right now, but the Prowler is not on the same level, and typically you should actually be running the Burst Prowler over the Select Fire because it has better damage output, but it's a little bit harder to use, but that's a whole other story for a whole other video. But I am putting this in B tier because it is a better option than the car currently, so it does put it a little bit higher in the tiers, but it's not really a solid weapon that you should be picking every single game, so I think it's more of a middle of the pack weapon, and that's why I'm putting it in B tier. And the last weapon in B tier is the Volt. Now the Volt is a good weapon, it's not an amazing weapon, and especially right now it doesn't have the fire rate to be the up close weapon, but the Volt does have a little bit more flexibility to it. The Volt is an SMG, so it is still good in a lot of different situations when it does come to up close fights, but it's a little bit more stable than the other SMGs, so you can run this as sort of an assault rifle replacement and still be perfectly fine with it. If you want to run it in medium fights, you can because of how easy the recoil is, and it still does have some pretty solid damage output in close range fights. Because of that versatility and flexibility, you can run this on a multitude of different legends right now that don't need to have a medium or long range weapon, especially when the fights are all up close and personal, so it does give you a little bit more flexibility when it comes to your loadout, and that's why I think it's a B tier weapon. It's not really a standout weapon, but it does have the flexibility in it, so that's why I do think it's more of a middle of the pack weapon, and that's why I'm putting it in B tier. But that is the B tier done, so let's move into the A tier, and there are 7 weapons finding themselves here. We have the Mastiff, the Wingman, the Spitfire, the G7 Scout, the Hemlock, the R301, and the Flatline. Now starting off, we have the Mastiff, and shotguns are still good. I've said it a bunch of times already, I'm probably going to say it a few more times, but the meta is just getting on top of someone as fast as you possibly can. You're running at people, you're Ash TPing at them, you're Ash dashing, you're throwing a Maggie ball. It doesn't matter how you're doing it, but you want to get into those close range fights, and that's where the Mastiff really likes to be. It wants to be on top of someone, it wants to be chunking them for like 100 damage each time you shoot it. But the issue with the Mastiff right now, and why it's not S tier, is because the fights are a little bit too in your face for this. The Mastiff wants to play behind a Gibby shield or a Newcastle wall or cover, and you want to peek out, hit somebody, peek back behind cover, and that's what the Mastiff does extremely well. But right now the meta is just straight up gunfighting somebody in their face and not really giving them time to react to it. And the Mastiff just doesn't have the same time to kill as the other weapons when it does come to those types of fights. It's still solid, but it's not S tier solid, so that's why I'm putting it in the A tier. But now we can move into the next weapon, which is the Wingman. And the Wingman is another weapon that I did have a little bit of trouble placing, but I do think that A tier is pretty solid for it because it does still have pretty good damage output potential. It also has the pistol stray speed, so again, like the RE45, you can be a little bit more elusive while using it, but the Wingman is a very high risk, high reward weapon. You have to be hitting at least a headshot in a fight. Like you can do headshot, headshot, body shot, headshot, body shot, something like that, but you need to hit a headshot in those fights in order for it to actually have the same damage output that the other weapons have, and in order to keep up in this meta. And if you're not able to do that, the Wingman is like a D tier weapon. But for the people that are able to do that, it does still have the damage potential, so that's why I do think it is still an A tier weapon. It's still a very solid weapon, and the fact that it does actually have extended mags now makes it an even better option. So it is still good. It's not broken though, so I do think it's A tier and not S tier, so this is where I'm putting it. Now next up we have the Spitfire, and the Spitfire is a Spitfire. It's still just ridiculously strong. You have so many bullets that you can be sending at people, you don't have to reload, you don't have to worry about anything like that. You can just be shooting until the fight is over, and even if you get third party, you still have bullets left over for them as well. And with the arsenals, it is incredibly easy to actually get a purple mag, so you have all the bullets in the world and you don't even have to worry about reloading ever. Now the Spitfire is still LMG, so it does still have the LMG drawback of not having the fastest stray speed while you are ADSing, so it does have that drawback, in which I do think is keeping the Spitfire in A tier, not anything higher. But the Spitfire is still a very solid option, especially if you have a gun shield on it. You don't really need the strafe speed because you're just mowing someone down before they even have a chance to react. A tier weapon, it's still good. Next weapon in A tier is the G7 Scout, and this is the exception for the marksman rifles because the G7 Scout has the fire rate to keep up with the other weapons. I've played around with the G7 because I was a little bit worried on the fact that marksman rifles might not be the best right now this season, and I can still report that the G7 is still good in a lot of different situations. And like I did say with the other ones, if you get into up close fights, the G7 has an incredibly solid hip fire, so if you are forced to hip fire somebody in close range, this is a very good gun to do so. I don't know what about this gun over the other guns makes the hipfire better, it just is better. But not only does the G7 have good damage numbers, good fire rate, good hipfire, it also has the ultimate accelerator on it. So if you're a legend that requires their ultimate in pretty much every single fight, this is a good weapon for you because you can do a little bit of poking while there is no fighting going on and get your ultimate back, and when a fight does break out, you have that in your back pocket ready to go. The G7 is still a very solid weapon, but it is a marksman rifle, so it is an A tier weapon and not anything higher, so that's where it stays. And next up we have 3 of the assault rifles, the Hemlock, the R301, and the Flatline. Now I do think that assault rifles are still in a very solid spot, but there's nothing standoutish about these 3 assault rifles to make them an S tier weapon. They are still good, and you can still pick these up and do perfectly fine with them. They have good damage output, they have good flexibility, they have good options, but there's nothing amazing about them in this meta. And for a weapon in this meta to be S tier, it needs to be amazing and stand outish because of the fast time to kill. Every weapon's good, good, but which weapon is amazing. And for that reason, I do think that these three should stay in the A tier because they are still solid and good weapons and you can pick them up and do perfectly fine with them, but they're not S tier material. But speaking of S tier, let's move into the S tier, and there are 5 weapons find themselves here. We've got the EVA 8, the L-Star, the Nemesis, the R99, and the Rampage. Starting off, the EVA 8, this is just the go-to up-close weapon if you are looking to just get in someone's face and kill them before they have any chance of understanding what just happened. A purple bolt EVA on an Ashe dashing around is terrifying. And the EVA in some other seasons did have a big drawback because if you weren't literally right next to somebody, it wasn't doing fantastic damage numbers, but right now, with how fast and agile characters are, you can just get into someone's face so easy that the EVA just doesn't have any drawbacks right now. And on Assault Legends, with the fast reload and the boosted litter, oh my god, the EVA just has so many different things going for it. There's no way that I could put this anything lower than S tier, so here we go. But next up we have the L-Star, and do I really have to talk about the L-Star? The L-Star is just a standout weapon right now. It has been for the past couple seasons. Last season it was really strong. This season they buffed it so it's even stronger, and right now it's just a very good weapon. This is the weapon that I've been using pretty much every single game because it just does so much damage and it has so much flexibility in terms of how you can use it in close range, medium range, and long range when you actually do understand the recoil pattern a little bit. And the bullets are huge. You don't even have to be really aiming at somebody for it to actually hit them. If you're aiming in like their general vicinity, it's basically just a full-on log flying at them and it's gonna hit them. If you have no idea what to pick up an L-Star. It'll work perfectly fine for you. And with the arsenals, again, it just makes it so easy to get these with a blue mag on it, and it's just really solid. And like I did mention, I've been using this pretty much every single game, and if you want to check out some of my gameplay live, come see me over on Twitch TV/8second gaming. I've been streaming pretty much every single day for my rank climb, so you guys can come over, check me out, watch my own gameplay, ask me questions, see how I play, see how I react to stuff, and I would love to see some new faces over there. So yeah, Twitch TV/8second gaming. But the next weapon in S tier is the Nemesis, and this is the Star Assault Rifle. Like I was talking about with the other assault rifles, there needs to be something about this weapon that makes it just a standout pick. And the Nemesis does have good damage numbers like the other assault rifles, it has good flexibility, but the Nemesis has the ultimate accelerator on it. And honestly, I feel like they should have given this to one of the other assault rifles, but the fact that they gave it to the Nemesis is wild. So again, if you're on one of those legends that does require their ultimate in every single fight, the Nemesis is a very solid option for you because it does so much damage to help you get that ultimate back, and it just is good in so many different situations. It's an assault rifle. It's always going to be a good pickup. I do hope that in the future, Respawn does nerf the Nemesis by moving the ultimate accelerator onto something like the 301, because I think that's more of a deserving assault rifle for it, but until they do that, it's probably going to stay in S tier, so that's where it's going to be. But the next weapon is the R99, and this came out of the care package with a vengeance, because for a few seasons, it hasn't really been a standout weapon. It's kind of been a mid-tier weapon. When they put in the care package, it was good, it wasn't super fantastic, people weren't really picking it up over shotguns last season, and it took that personal. It came out of the care package and is now just running everyone's pockets. This is a one-clip machine, and if you were a R99 fan before, you're definitely an R99 fan now. Now, me personally, I'm not really a big R99 fan. It doesn't mesh with my playstyle personally, but even I can recognize how good this weapon is, and even when I pick it up, it does still feel like an absolute beast. So yeah, it's an S tier weapon for sure. And the last weapon in the S tier is the Rampage. The Rampage is doing 30 to the body and 38 to the head. A charged up Rampage breaking down doors, making it so nowhere safe is scary. And if you're playing ballistic, throw this in the sling, because when you use your ultimate, it comes charged up and it's just ready to go. A ballistic with a charged Rampage in the sling being all golded out, oh my god, is that terrifying. Right now, this is the only weapon that I actually consider running over the L-Star. That's how good the Rampage is right now. And for the people that haven't really used the Rampage before, if it isn't charged up, play it more like a marksman rifle, single fire it instead of holding the fire rate down. That'll help you get into the groove a little bit and help you understand how the bullets actually fly. That's something that I did when the Rampage first came out to kind of get used to it a little bit, but once it's charged up, treat it more like an assault rifle. This isn't a weapon that you should be treating like an LMG. It doesn't play like an LMG, it plays more like one of the two, so keep that in mind when you are using it. But let me know in the comments down below, which weapon are you running the most this season? If you guys want to stay up to date with the latest and greatest Apex Legends tips, tricks, and news, don't forget to smash the like and subscribe button. Thanks all for watching. Once again, I'm 8second Gaming. I'll see you guys in the next one.